In this video, I'm going to show you how to do hypothesis testing within StatCrunch. To do this, go ahead and open up the tutorial Excel file on the crops page in the lab homework folder, and then go to statcrunch.com, and where it says My Data, go ahead and click on Select a File from my computer. And you can click Browse, find the file that you downloaded from crops, and then make sure to click Share with everyone. And then you can just load the file. So I have the file open right here. It's called Lab Dataset Hypothesis Testing. And within it, we have one independent variable, one grouping variable, which is gender. I know in your observational studies, a lot of you are comparing men versus women. So that's the same kind of thing we have going on here. And then we have two variables that could be our dependent variables, or the things that we're measuring. So right here we have Facebook minutes per day. So this is the amount of Facebook time they're spending each day. And then we have number of Facebook friends. So in order to do hypothesis testing, you first need a hypothesis. Basically a guess at which one of these, men or women, is going to be higher than the other in terms of Facebook minutes and Facebook friends. So in a Word document here, let's go ahead and put our hypothesis just so that we have this for later. So for example, we could estimate that maybe women are spending more time on Facebook, but maybe men have more Facebook friends. I don't really have any data or research to back that up, but let's just say that's our hypothesis. So we could say is, we hypothesized that women would be spending more time on Facebook than men, but that men would have more Facebook friends than women. So those are two hypotheses we could test. So the easiest way to test this out is to run a couple of t-tests. T-tests, their main function is to test to see if one group is higher than another group in a given measurement variable. So this is perfect for this kind of analysis. So to do that, go to Stat, T-test, and since we have two separate samples, or basically two groups, men and women, we're going to go to Sample T-test, and we're always going to select with data, because we have actual data for this. So since we have men and women here in the same column, what we need to do is divide them a little bit using some where functions. But first we're going to say what values are we going to be comparing. So in the values box, go ahead and put Facebook minutes per day, because that's both samples we're going to be comparing that dependent variable or that measure. And then to separate our two groups, click on the build button in the where box. And the first group is going to be gender, add column, equals, and in parentheses write in woman. Because we have to put in parentheses because it's actual words instead of numbers there. So the first category or the first group we're comparing is gender equals woman. And the second group is gender equals man. The best way to set up a t-test is to have the independent variable or the two groups in one column and the dependent variable or the measure in a separate column, and then just set it up like this. Now, very importantly, we have to say in what direction do we expect this difference to be in. So right now, the way it is hypothesis testing, our null hypothesis is just that if we take the mean of one group, the mu of 1, and the mean of the second group, the mu of 2, and we minus 1 from the other, that the null hypothesis is that there shouldn't be any difference between them, so if we minus 1 by the other, we'd get a result of 0. Our alternative hypothesis, or what we hope to actually be true, is going to be different from that. So right now it's just set that if we minus 1 from another, it just won't equal 0. In other words, one group should be bigger than the other. But since we have a directional hypothesis here, we hypothesize that women would be spending more time on Facebook than men. Then since we put in women here first, we're expecting basically the mu of 1, or this first group, to have a larger mean than the mu of 2. The second group. And if we take a big number minus a smaller number, we should get a result that's larger than 0. So here just put in larger than. So now go ahead and hit compute. And what we see here are the results of the t-test, and the most important factor is this one right here, the p-value. So for two groups to be significantly different from one another, they need to have a p-value at or below 0.05. And here we definitely have that, so it's 0.02. So in other words, it is indeed true that women are spending more time on Facebook than men. Hey, that's kind of cool. I just guessed at that and it happened to be true. So in this case, if this was 0.05, it would still be significant. If this was 0.054, it would round to 0.05. That would still be significant. But if it was 0.055 or anything larger, it would not be a significant difference. But in fact, we did get a significant difference. So to write that up, we can go confirming our first hypothesis. It was found that women spend significantly more time on Facebook than men. And this is could be considered our results statement. So these are hypotheses, and this is our result for our first hypothesis. Now we need to add some statistics in here, namely our t-statistics. To do that, go ahead and sneak in behind the period here and put a little comma in space, and then put a lowercase t. That stands for t-statistic. And then in parentheses, we want to put our degrees of freedom, or DF, which right here is 132. The degrees of freedom is a little bit different for every type of test you do. For t-tests, it's just simply how many people you have in your data set minus how many groups you're looking at. So in this case, we had 134 people in our data set minus 2 groups, men versus women, so our DF was 132. You don't really need to remember that, but that's just where that number comes from. It's kind of a simple calculation. And then right here, you can put what our t-statistic was equal to the 100th place. You can find that right here where it says t-stat. So here we have a t-statistic of 1.97 if we're going to round to the 100th place. And then our p-value, here our p is equal to actually we don't need a 0 there, so just 0.03. And the reason we don't put a 0 here is because the p-value is always going to be below 0. The highest it can ever be is 0.99. And so according to APA format, you don't even bother putting in a 0 there. But make sure to follow this format exactly, because APA standards even apply to how many spaces you have in there. So put a space, of course, between each article, between the T and the degrees of freedom and the equal sign. And then again, don't put a 0 for the p-value. But you do put a 0 for the t-value if it happened to be a 0. So those are our t-statistics we place in there. This is a way for researchers to double check and go, yep, that looks like a significant result. The p is below 0.05. And now we need to put in the means for how many minutes women versus men are spending on Facebook. That way we can show readers what exactly that difference is. So in order to do that, we'll just put this over here for now. We're going to get the means of these two groups, and you can find that under Stat, Summary Stat, Columns. And we're going to look for Facebook minutes per day, and then we're also going to put in here, all we need is mean and standard deviation. So we have our dependent measure, Facebook minutes per day. We're going to look at the mean and standard deviation, and then we're going to group it by gender. So we have one for men and one for women. So if we hit compute, we get the means and standard deviation for both. And it actually looks like there's quite a few more minutes that women are spending versus men on Facebook each day. About 76 compared to 45 minutes. So if we go back here, we're going to input those statistics wherever they make sense to do so. In other words, right after mentioning the first and second groups. So right here, it was found that women spend significantly more time on Facebook. So right here, we could put the mean and standard deviation for women. So the mean for women, we're always going to run to the 100th place, is 76.39. Semicolon, and then put in an SD for standard deviation. And for women, it is 97.26. which I'm just getting from this row right here. And then compare it to men. So then the men, we're going to put in their mean, which is 45.02, rounding to the 100th place, and their SD, standard deviation, which is 77.02. So there we have all the statistics we need for our results. We have the means and standard deviations for each group, and then the t-statistics showing that they're significantly different from each other. The last little step in order to appease APA formatting is to italicize any statistical acronyms such as M, S, D for standard deviation, T, and P. So any letter that represents a statistic, we're going to go ahead and italicize. It helps them sort of pop out to the viewer. So the last thing we need to wrap up our summary of this result is a nice graph showing this difference visually. We can do this by going to Graphs, and since we're going to be looking at their means, we're going to do a means plot. And just like before, we're putting in Facebook minutes per day for the dependent variable, and we're grouping it by gender, one for men and one for women. And that's all you need to do here. You can just hit compute. And then it creates this nice little means box where it basically shows the mean of both groups, It also shows the first and third quartile. What that means is that the 25th percentile for women comes in right around 50 minutes or so, maybe 55 minutes. So that means about 25% of women are below this and 75% are above this. And the 75th percentile for women is about 100 minutes. And again, it shows that for men as well. But really what we're looking at mostly is the mean. And there's the mean of women at 76, and there's the mean for men at 45. So it definitely shows women are higher than men in this respect. So in this way, in order to get this graph in there, one of the easier ways to do it is just to hit copy. And then it comes up with this little thing. It says Control-click the image below to copy it. You can also just right-click it and say copy image. Or I guess you could also go Command-C if you're on a Mac or Control-C if you're on Windows. I just like right-clicking. And then when you come back into Word, go ahead and make a new page, because figures and graphs are always on their own separate page. So in Windows, you can just hit Control-Enter. In the Mac, you have to hit Command-Shift-Enter, and it'll create a new page right there. This is a lot better than just hitting Enter a bunch of times till you make a new page, because then if you go back and edit anything in here, that could screw you up if these are just a bunch of spaces or enters right here. But even if you sort of mess with and edit this and add more and take away text, if you have a clean page break by using Command-Enter or Command-Shift-Enter or Control-Enter, then it's not going to mess up the next page. So on the next page, you can right-click, it hits Paste. Oh, and sometimes this doesn't work. Sometimes you have to get right-click, hit Paste Special, and then make sure that picture is selected. I'm actually glad that happened just in case it happens to any of you guys. So hit Picture, hit OK. It should pop it right in there. There it is. So then we just need to give it a little title to this. So in APA, these are called figures whenever you're doing a graph. And this is our first figure, so right underneath it in italics, we're going to put in figure 1, period. And then in non-italics, we're going to give this figure a title. Should be something simple, so we can just say number of minutes spent on Facebook per day between women and men. It can be anything as long as it makes sense for what your graph represents. And then since we want to cite this figure up in our main body, right under the results page at the very end, we can just put in here figure 1. And don't italicize this up here. So the figure is only italicized if it's actually as part of the figures page. So there is a complete t-test, going from a hypothesis, a result statement, and even a graph to show it off. This is what you'll be doing for your observational study. I'll do this one more time in order to show you all the steps once again. So let's say we wanted to test out our second hypothesis, that men would have more Facebook friends than women. Then again, we'll just go through all the steps. First, we'll do a t-test. So here we can go stat, t-test, toSample with data. And this time we're going to select Facebook friends in both columns. But again, we're going to build the columns, or build the where statements comparing women and men. And since this time we have a slightly different hypothesis, we think men are going to have more Facebook friends than women, we put men in second. So in this case, what we're expecting is this is going to be the smaller number, since this is the first group we put in, and this is going to be the larger number. And if you subtract a smaller number by a larger number, you should actually get a product or a result that's less than 0. So in this case, you want to make the little crocodile eat the 0, because that's going to be bigger. If we take the small number minus a big number, we're going to end up getting a negative number over here. So go ahead and hit compute, and let's see if it comes out right. Oh, in this case, it really doesn't. So the p-value right here couldn't be much more above 0.05. It's almost close to 0.99. So clearly, this was not a significant result in our favor, owning up to our hypothesis. Maybe this is because perhaps women have more Facebook friends than men. In that case, our hypothesis that men would have more Facebook friends than women would definitely not be true. To go ahead and see if that's the case, we'll jump ahead a little bit just to do the summary stats. So if we go stat, summary stats, columns, we're going to go Facebook friends, group by gender, and again, all we need is the mean and standard deviation, and hit compute. Oh, and indeed, that's the case. So in this case, our hypothesis definitely wasn't confirmed because women have way more Facebook friends than men. It's probably true, or could be true, that if we hypothesize that women would actually have more Facebook friends than men, then our hypothesis might end up being true. In other words, our p-value might end up being significant. But we always have to stick with our a priori or previously made hypothesis. Because if we just change hypothesis willy-nilly to match our data, then our hypothesis wouldn't mean much at all. Our hypothesis is a prediction of a theory or an expectation, and that's really what we're trying to test out, not just what the data shows. So let's see, right here we could say disconfirming our second hypothesis. It was found that men do not have more friends on Facebook than women. And then again, we can put in our statistics here. So again, let's start with the mean and standard deviation for both groups this time. So it says it was found that men do not have more friends than on Facebook. So we can put in the mean and standard deviation for men here. So the mean number of Facebook friends for men was 356.62. And the standard deviation was 270.06. And I'm just getting that information from right here, the mean and standard deviation of men. And then for women, they had a mean of 471.17 and a standard deviation of 308.27. And at the end, we're going to put in, again, a T for T statistic, put in our DF, right here, degrees of freedom, 133. So apparently one more person answered this question for either men or women compared to this question. And then our T statistic, which is 2.2, so 2.21. And our p-value is equal to 0.99, because rounding up. So right there is about as high a p-value as you can get. And we'll go ahead and make a figure for this too. So our figure is figure 2. And so since we made a figure down here, we'll go ahead and create a separate page. Again, hit Control-Enter for Windows or Command-Shift-Enter for Mac. And then we'll make the graph here by going to Graph, Means Plot, Facebook minutes per day grouped by gender, and hit compute. And as you can see, definitely women had more than men, so our hypothesis was for sure disconfirmed. So since we have the image over here, let me show you one different way that we could do it in case the copy and paste doesn't work for you. If we right click this, we can also go Save Image, and then we can save it anywhere. I'll just save it on my desktop. We can put in here figure 2, and we can have it as a ping file, that's fine. And then in here, we could either just drag it over and plop it on, or we could also insert it by going Insert, Picture or Photo, Picture from File. We should find figure 2 right here. So if we click on that, that's just another way to import it. And then we can go in italicize, figure 2, unitalicize. And actually, we could just sort of pretty much copy and paste the wording here. We just put number of Facebook friends between women and men. And then the last little bit is just to italicize all of the means and standard deviations, t-value, and the p-value, any statistical acronym that we have. So there we have our hypothesis statement, the result statement number 1, the result statement number 2 for our second hypothesis, along with our 2 graphs. So for this homework, you're only going to be turning in the Word document. So just save this somewhere, perhaps on your desktop or in your documents. It's helpful if you can title it Lab 2 and then your name. And in order to do the homework, make sure to go to Crops and download the homework instructions and the separate homework data sheet that you're going to import into StatCrunch. But you'll do all these same steps. And then just make sure to email it to me from your UC Merced account. And that's it.